Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation here today. The fact that I am basically in charge of VR at Harvard, and the irony there should not escape anyone, I hope. Harvard being one of the great examples of virtual reality on the planet, I think. We have a number of projects in the lab. We are, in fact, very actively engaged in setting up to teach in VR. I built a 20-seat, one-class VR theater, and we are actively developing courseware to teach in VR, both in stored VR programming and also live streaming VR. You might be interested to note the largest class by enrollment at Harvard these days is CS50, which is Introduction to Computer Science, and it has 800 students in it. This is David Malin's class. In the fall, we will be VR streaming all of his classes for CS50, for example. So we have a number of interesting things going on. Today, I'm going to just talk about one project, which is a fun project, actually, and a very challenging one, which led us to a internal discussion about the length of VR programming, which is something everybody struggles with, but basically sort of ignores, with the exception of the idea that keep it short until you figure out how to make it long. And that's basically the rule at the moment. We decided to take a look at how to make it long and how to make it work. And our target was Burning Man. Good choice, right? A lot of interesting things. It's a very complex thing to set about making a documentary about, particularly a VR documentary. And so that's what I'm going to walk you through today. Burning Man, I hope everybody has at least heard of it. How many people have been to Burning Man, by the way? We have a few burners in the room, not enough. Everybody else, I highly recommend it. For that 1 week in the year, it is probably the most interesting place on the planet to be. And the reason is that you've got 80,000 people who show up out in the middle of the desert for a week, determined to not be normal. And that leads for some very interesting interactions. And it was the interactions that came out of the, particularly the art experience at Burning Man. And Burning Man is fundamentally an art festival, although art is very widely defined here, that led us to approach this. It's a very difficult thing to describe, actually. I imagine it sort of, when one returns from one's first Burning Man, being very similar to being the first guy who returned from the moon, and everybody says, what was it like? It's not an easy answer. It's a very complicated answer, in fact. What you have is probably the largest uncurated art festival that's ever been conceived. And by uncurated, I don't mean that there isn't a lot of thought and seriousness that goes into the art, but basically if you can build it, they will let you build it. If you can run it, they will let you run it. And you can experiment on a level that is really not approachable in any other venue, particularly if you're interested in scale. If you're interested in doing large things for a lot of people, this is your environment. It is out in the Black Rock Desert, about 2 hours or so north of Reno. One of the most inhospitable places on the planet. In fact, that's why it was chosen. They basically said, where is it the most difficult place to reach in the United States? And that's where we'll put this festival. Because it is meant to be a challenge. This is a experience in sort of extreme survival, shall we say. You have to bring all your own food, water. There's no power, no Wi-Fi. There's no cellular service. There is nothing to purchase. You cannot use money at Burning Man. Most people at Burning Man use a pseudonym or a fake name. No one carries identification. It is a very strange place. But a very fascinating one. The environment itself is quite challenging. In fact, one of the reasons we decided to do this work is we're in the process of working in Egypt, in Giza, outside of Cairo, on the Giza Plateau, documenting the tombs, pyramids, and temples of Old Kingdom Egypt. And working in the Egyptian desert is quite a challenging environment. And we decided the only environment that was more challenging we could test our hardware in was Burning Man. In a lot of ways, they're actually quite similar. The other thing is that a lot of the art at Burning Man is meant to be immersive. And of course, VR is an immersive recording medium. So there seemed to be a very good fit between trying to capture the sort of movable insanity of the festival and its immersive qualities with an immersive recording system. These are what are called mutant vehicles. They are, in fact, art vehicles, art cars that are built on automobile or bus chassis that drive around out in the desert on essentially support systems for movable parties. You can get on them and get off them. They are particularly interesting when the sandstorms hit and your visibility drops to about 20 feet and you have dozens of these large vehicles crisscrossing in the desert around you, and they appear and disappear out of the clouds. This is what was called Media Circus. This is, in fact, where journalists get their permissions to film at Burning Man. It's actually quite difficult to film at Burning Man. Part of the ethos of Burning Man is that it is meant to be anonymous. It's non-commercial. You're not supposed to sort of benefit financially in any way, so no commercial filming is allowed. And in fact, we were very fortunate. My chief VR photographer and editor, his uncle, Flash Hopkins, founded Burning Man. So we basically were able to get an all-access backstage pass, which turned out to be really quite amazing. This is center camp at night. The night image at Burning Man is considerably different than the day. Day, it's bright sun, middle of the desert, 100 degrees. If you don't get enough hydration and aren't near some shade, you can die. At night, it's cold, 30 degrees, completely dark. There is no electricity. Despite what you see here, where everything is lit up, this is all battery or generator powered or runs off of LEDs. With the 80,000 participants out there at night, you must light yourself up and your bicycle. And by the way, last estimate was 50,000 bicycles at Burning Man, all of which were lit with LEDs and in motion at the same time out in the desert in the night. Also, you're allowed to burn things and blow them up, things that you're not usually allowed to do in art festivals. You can burn very large things, and you can blow up very large things. Butane is one of the hottest trade items at the festival because it's consumed in very large quantities. This is about a 100-foot articulated fire-breathing snake, which is a pretty interesting thing. Here you can get a size estimate of the crowd. This circle is about 2 kilometers in diameter, and there are about 80,000 people surrounding the final burn of the man. You get some idea of the scale of what's going on here. Filming at Burning Man is both difficult and problematic for some of the reasons that I mentioned, not the least of which, like I say, is the fact that you often go into whiteout conditions. You may recognize a 6-camera GoPro rig here. Bicycle and GoPro rig was our sort of basic way of shooting. GoPro rigs were particularly good because being waterproof, they're also dust-proof, which was very handy. Other people have tried to film there without them and failed miserably, I have to say. This was this is a portable typewriter, human scale. We went out one morning and were looking for things to shoot. We found this. Oh, that's great. We went back to get the cameras. By the time we got back, it was gone. This is another interesting thing. Things only appear and disappear for hours or a few days at Burning Man, completely unpredictable as to what you will find each day you go out. Here's 3 of our rigs. We took 3 VR rigs with us and included one of the more interesting challenges we had. We had 90 batteries and no electricity other than what we could generate ourselves. We filmed 14 hours a day for the week, meaning we were basically in filming mode the entire time. And we burned through multiple terabytes of 64 gig chips. The 3 of us were the primary photographers on this. We had producers assisting us. So how do you design a VR documentary for a long, complicated event as large and challenging as Burning Man? How long should a final film be in VR? And how do you use that? Cinema links are usually dictated by distribution mediums, not by the shooter or the people, the creatives involved. It's determined by how you're going to distribute this. So can a VR documentary, in fact, be feature length or long form? And what does that mean, basically? The best answer for how long any documentary should be is as long as it takes to tell the story. Well, the stories at Burning Man are quite long, quite complicated, which mean that you would need a very long, complicated film to do that. You do have some constraints these days, particularly on the viewing side with viewer fatigue. You've got your headset ergonomics, how big, how heavy it is, look-around strain. That is, if you give people the ability to look around, they look around, and very quickly they have a sore neck from looking around for any length of period of time. Social isolation, how long can you stay inside of a headset before you have to check your phone? Digital storage capacity on your both not only your shooting devices but your viewing devices, and the what is coming to be in the future, the speed and cost of the streaming infrastructure, as we'll see. Most comfortable learning and viewing times in general are about a class time, 50 to 60 minutes, but the average VR experience today is less than 10 minutes. The average non-VR documentary runs 110 minutes. There's an old newspaper adage that a 15-minute telephone interview is a long interview, but a face-to-face 15 minutes is short. 5 minutes in VR feels longer than 5 minutes on a movie screen. A night out at the movies makes a film shorter than watching it at home. Watching a film on an iPad or an iPod is rarely a continuous event. It's a series of bouts or single sessions. Watching a 30-minute documentary on a laptop feels longer than watching a 60-minute documentary on a flat screen. These are all things you have to take into consideration. So, is this a chicken and egg problem, or does it reflect the nature of variable length media? Can we conceive a variable length VR documentary that has no fixed length and at the same time does not cause the viewer to suffer physical fatigue, or what I like to call director infatuation fatigue? So, how do we solve that? I'll skip through a couple things and we'll get to our solution. The structure of our film looks like this: a linear preview, a map-based selection menu, and user scene ordering. So, what we have on the top are, in this case, 14 scenes. We shot 56 scenes over the week. The bulk of the 50 scenes are below. So the linear form of the interview takes a short sample from each of several scenes, strings them together, you're on rails, and then dumps you at the end to a menu. The menu shows where all of the scenes that we shot. This is a vertical view of the playa. The circular ring is where the campsites are. The playa in the center is where the performance and performance art occurs. By indicating which of these things were of what type, they were art, they were music, they were camp life. The last scene coming out of the linear form of the film is you are looking down in the empty desert and you are looking down at this map. If you use your gaze interface and you look at one of these dots and tap your VR headset, you teleport into that scene. That scene may last 2 minutes, may last 5 minutes. Our longest scene is 74 minutes long, a continuous 74-minute shot. When you hit each one of these scenes, you don't know how long it is when you get in it. And that allows you to decide when to exit. You can exit quickly or you could exit very shortly. Here we're up on the top of the RV. At the end of seeing any one of the scenes, it returns you to the menu and you can choose another scene. And again, link together more than one scene if you wish. So you might choose 3 art scenes or 3 music scenes, link them together before you return to the menu. So one of the ideas here is that if I tell you you're going to watch a 3-hour documentary in a headset, you're going to basically say, I don't think so. If I say you're going to watch a 10-minute teaser about what this documentary is about, and then I'm going to let you choose how long the documentary is for you, and I'm actually not going to tell you very much about what these scenes are. You're going to have to experience them and explore them yourselves. What happens is you can't resist. You'll push every one of those red buttons just to see what happens. And you will, in fact, come out having watched a 3-hour VR documentary. So, most of what we did was ambient audio. We did do a couple of interviews, particularly with Flash Hopkins. He's the gentleman in the hat here, who was one of the founders back in the 1990s. But generally, we've taken in this discussion between directed and non-directed documentaries, this is non-directed. There is no narration track on this documentary. The experience is the experience. And this actually turns out, as several other speakers have said, to be quite powerful. It allows the event to speak for itself, allows you to choose what you are interested in. Oh yeah, I should say something about this scene. This is Tom from GoPro. We gave him one of our cameras, we bolted it onto his helmet, and he jumped out of an airplane at 5,000 feet and skydived into the center of the playa. It makes for a very interesting shot. We also had our second VR camera on the ground, and so he spotted the camera and was able to land directly in front of the second camera. So we're able to do a camera transition between the two from the skydive to the ground shot. In fact, it was very interesting having 3 cameras and doing a 3-camera VR shoot. Allows you to do things you cannot do with single camera involvement. This is one of the interviews. So basically, we searched for and tried to find the most immersive art we could. We tried to couple that with the type of immersive experience that we felt would draw you in and allow you to try and have that great sense of presence, of being there. And in fact, I think it works. I hope everybody will go upstairs. We have the 10-minute preview available to check it out. If you haven't been to Burning Man, fair warning. If you see this, you will want to go. Thank you.